Good evening. Thank you all for being here tonight. This is a part of our Racial Equity Speaker Series. As the Equity Department, each month we're diving a little bit deeper into one of the equity issues that we believe needs to be spoken to in our district. And so we have a special treat today. Our speaker today is a man named Joshua Magallances. I've known Josh for about 3 years. He's originally from Arizona. He earned a master's in community mental health from Jannuary in 2012. He specializes in community mental health with special interest in depression, anxiety, sexuality, gender identity, intersectionality, and career counseling. He is an amazing keynote speaker. I've seen him do a lot of work with youth. And he also was recently featured in an interview on Q13 News. And if you ask him really, really nicely, he might showcase his really powerful singing voice. But I'll leave that for you. I'll leave that on the table. But yeah, Josh is he's a great person, and I'm really excited that we have the opportunity to showcase him here today. So without further ado, Joshua Magallances.
We good? Great. Hi, everybody. Good evening, I guess it is, right? Yeah. I'm Joshua Magallances, and I'm excited to be here in Bellevue with all of you to talk a little bit deeper about what it means to change the face of queerness and what that looks like today in 2018. You'd probably think that so much has gone on, especially around civil rights and the movement, especially around the queer movement. But we're kind of right back where we were way back in the 40s and 60s. And a movie I saw this past week, the Tom Phelan movie, which is a really strong showcase of an artist who created art in a time where being queer, or back then gay, was not acceptable. And folks were being killed and beaten for having sex with same-gendered individuals. And still today, we may not physically so much publicly hurt people or beat, but we do that in language, and we do that in emotion, and we do that in microaggressive ways that are still happening. And in my opinion, as a therapist, and somebody who really likes to dig beneath the layers, that is the most damaging. And so today I'm going to explore with you all, today's going to be interactive, we're going to do some work around what it means to become an accomplice, right? And what it means to become somebody who really wants to go not just into a community, but to embrace, immerse into a community and become that accomplice who really shows up and doesn't get to choose when they want to be an ally, because there's some privilege in being an ally. And so we're going to demystify some of that, and I'll talk about that with you all today. So, but before I get started and really get into the meat, I need to ask for permission. My family's from Arizona, and I identify as part of the Latin or Latinx community, and I identify as a Latino gay male. And more recently, within the past 6 to 8 years or so, most recently, have been reintroduced to some of my ancestors that are also usually forgotten. And those are the Apache nation in Arizona. And so I need to ask for permission of all of you to share in tonight's conversation and to share in the land that we are all taking up space on today and using, because the land has been here before, and it's interesting as I'm seeing cranes and new structure across the street. That we really take time to acknowledge that this wasn't necessarily ours at one time. And so if I could have your permission to embrace the conversation. And push a little bit. We're going to push. It's going to be tough tonight. So thank you. Good. So who am I, right? And I think it's important as a speaker. Many times we come on and we just go into the nitty-gritty and we get into the meat and start talking. But it's important to know who I am. And I kind of talked a little bit about it. But this gentleman up here, Rafael H. Magallances. His mother's maiden name was Herrera, and he used the H as the middle initial of himself. And the reason why I put him up there in terms of intersectionality and identity is because this gentleman up here taught me what it meant to be to love, and to touch, and to care, and to have compassion. And this wonderful person But he brought me those gifts, and he taught me how to show up in this world. And then we have Nancy Jean Magallances, my mother, who was the one who really taught me how to fight, how to stake my ground, how to build foundation for myself, how to get in front of people and ask for what I need and stand for myself. I'm also made up of these gentlemen, these handsome gentlemen who are my brothers. They're my rock, they're my people. The ranchero on the left, Ralph, myself, Gary the athlete, and then Mario, our youngest brother, who we sometimes refer to as truly the mother hen, because he is the base of our family. He's the one who really keeps us in line. My softball team, Los Gallitos, which is a gay softball team, and we compete nationally each year, both here in Seattle and beyond. And these gentlemen are also part of who make me up. They become my family, my chosen family. And then there's this lovely profession that I truly have as my vocation. I can remember a young mentor talking to me about, Josh, make sure when you start to work that you love your work, and the minute you stop loving your work, it's time to check yourself, take a step back and decide, is this what you really should be doing? Well, I haven't had to step away yet, and I do love therapy, and I love providing that, but that also provides an intersection of who I am. And I say all of this because I'm not one singular person. I'm not one linear individual that shows up to you today in a nice navy suit and a wonderful button-down shirt. I'm giving myself some props, you can laugh, right? But I say that because I'm multi-layered. And there's a lot more to me than just what you see here in front of me, right? And so it's important that as we go through tonight's material and we talk through together what it means to be queer, or what it's like to identify as part of that community, that we don't just see who's in front of us or who's around your table, but that you ask yourself those questions. Who might they be? Who might this woman be in this beautiful shawl? Who might this individual be in a navy sweater? Who might that person be with that flannel? What is below the surface for them? And who do they bring forward each day? And who do they leave at home each day? It's very important. So today we're going to hopefully get into some awareness and knowledge, skills, build in some advocacy. What does that even look like to be an advocate, right? Hopefully some self-assessment, and I have allyship up there, and we'll talk a little bit about that some more. But really, I'm hoping in this hour and a half that most of you leave as an accomplice. Or at least leave here tonight questioning yourself. Can I show up that way? Can I truly take a stand and become an accomplice and put me in a place that might be uncomfortable, where I have to decide whether or not, if I'm willing to lose perhaps friends, community, family, because what you feel is right is choosing to support and lift in an equitable way someone else that you care about deeply. We're going to talk a little bit about some history and see what you all know. I need to get a rhythm and a pulse and see what you guys know. Skills. I don't like to, one of the things that is a huge pet peeve of mine is when I'm at a presentation and the person gets up there and speaks, I leave and I think to myself, well, what are the tangibles? What are the things that I can take away? How can I, in my classroom, use some of the skills that this individual gave me or not? Or if I'm a student, how can I take this in to navigate hard conversations at home or with faculty and staff who just don't get me, right? So hopefully today you'll leave with some of that. And I want to leave you with some resources, both locally and nationally, that you can reach out to. I'm probably, well, I shouldn't assume, so I won't do that. But Many of us probably have seen some of the resources I'm going to give you today, and if you have, keep digging deeper. As a therapist, one of the things I tell myself, and not just myself as an instructor at Seattle University in the grad program, I tell my young counselors, you have to keep doing your homework. You have to keep researching and educating yourself. It shouldn't end the day you get your degree. And lastly, it's important that I think we understand ourselves, who our audience is, and our practice. What is it that we really want to practice out? All right, oops, what happened? There we go. All right. So ground rules. I'm just going to give you guys a chance to kind of look at it for a little while, and if you see something that might be missing, if you'd like to maybe raise your hand or just popcorn out what you think might be missing up here. And I learned this the other day at a middle school that I spoke at. They said when you want to get their attention, Josh, you give them a high five in the air. So if you are ready to move on, if you just give me a high five. Ah, it's wonderful. I command the whole room. Just kidding. Awesome. So again, up here, these are the ground rules we hope to live by today for this evening, and that will keep us within the rails. All right, cool. So real quickly at your table, what I'd like you to do is introduce yourself. Maybe you came with people that you do know, but I'd like you to introduce yourself in a way that allows people around you to understand who you are. So your name or what you'd like to be called today, maybe where you're from, and also which pronoun you would like others to refer to you as. When we say things like prefer, that's giving others an option, okay? I don't want you to give others option today because I want you to let them know I'm Joshua and I will be using he, him pronouns for myself today. And that's what I would like all of you to use for me as well. So just take a couple minutes at your table. Go ahead.
I'm Michelle. Call me right. Her. She. Get up. I've heard some other names.
Probably out loud. Really loud.
Oh, come on.
Try to be low-key. It's tough to do.
Where's your water bottle?
I'm record. I'll come around here. Come on, don't talk about the Wolverines. We're out here. It's about the brothers and the
Those pictures were seen.
How do I say it?
Magallances? Okay. So what was it like to get to know folks at your table? What did you learn about them? Where they're from. Great. These folks up here had a really colorful conversation. I don't know if they're willing to share it out. What else? What about the pronouns that maybe you've seen or not seen or maybe have heard or not heard before? Everybody used pretty run-of-the-mill pronouns.
We did, but we don't know what
We
the
don't
other three are.
know.
Is there
Z is
any?
I, right?
subtlety in the pronunciation of her when it's H-I-R? Because I haven't seen it or that spelled out that way.
Zersouth, Zers, right? So what the questions are is around pronouns. And many of you have heard. How many faculty do I have in the room tonight? Any faculty? How many of you have maybe heard some of these different pronouns? None. How about for the students in the room? Any students hear some of these pronouns being used by maybe your peers? No. Okay. They will start appearing more so. And in fact, in older literature, the ZE was used very commonly because it didn't have to denote a gender. And one of the things we do as a society is we love to gender and place people into certain roles without their permission. When we think about gender roles, when we think about identity, when we think about how folks express, we give them a label. The minute you were born, you were given a label. You were given a gender and a biological sex. Given. Not asked, but told this is what you're going to do. And so many times I'll ask people, well, how do you know that a male is a male? Because some white individual who delivered you was there and said, you're now male. Right? And so what these last three get to do for folks is they allow folks to choose not to be put in a box and not to be put in a categorization, but instead to be something that is much more fluid in society. When you think about it, I mean, here's some ideas and examples of how it could be used grammatically correct. Any English majors in here? Oh, good. We can mess it all up now. But this all does fit. And it's interesting when you take a step back and think about, wow, I never thought that the gender could be that complicated, or that a pronoun could mean that much to an individual, but it does. And our students more and more, if you're showing slides like this, will allow students to feel much more comfortable, and even the staff that you work around. Because my guess is that there are more and more staff who identify as trans, but just aren't identified because of their counterparts not feeling open to, or them not being open around them. So, cool. So this work is important, obviously. You know this. These are the major statistics, right? And what's interesting about homophobia, transphobia, etc., is that our youth, and most of the reasons that folks are not reasons, but folks who work in education understand this top bullet here around our LGBTQI or queer students at least attempting suicide 4 times more than their counterpart. That's high. And so when we think about it on a mental health level, our folks who identify as queer are also reaching out for mental health help at a higher level as well. And if we talk about race, we can even degrade the data out more, and it's even higher amongst communities of color, etc. What's interesting about the third bullet here is 90% of our youth report that they frequently hear these remarks from school people, us. We made a remark that has been either in some way, shape, or form a way to put down individuals who identify as queer, or along the margins, or somebody who doesn't identify within the binary. You're probably hearing a lot around that. And there's also increased homelessness. Drive any major populated area, whether it be downtown Seattle, it's moving into Bellevue, areas that might appear safe, you'll start to see more and more transient youth, and it's sad. And so why is that happening? I guess that's my question, right? Why is all of this happening? Why are folks not choosing to go to school? When I look around in here and I see happy faces, I see faces that I would want to be in front of me in the classroom, but how come they're not showing up? Is it because they just don't care, they don't have motivation, they lack the drive? Or is it because we're not willing to show up in a different way? Is it because we're willing to show up in the way that we have always known to be? Whether it be religion, whether it be community, or our culture that says this is how we must show up and not change our own model. So here's just a little breakdown. when we think about low-income or no-income individuals, right, folks who maybe, and you can take any of the communities, whether they identify as gay, straight, lesbian, queer, transgender, low income or no income. Many individuals that I work with who identify as trans have a really hard time finding strong employment. And I say strong employment as a loose term, because what is good employment, what isn't, right? But at least enough money to live comfortably and not have to show up in a way that doesn't allow them to express out who they are. Inadequate or no health care. Individuals, again, if we think about transient youth and who are either kicked out of their home or pushed out of their home because of their identity, individuals are having to work 2 and 3 different jobs just to make rent, let alone have health care. And even with health care, and I don't need to get political around that right now, but even that is becoming more and more of a challenge. And so then the cycle reverts back to homelessness or risk. And I tell people all the time, my clients included, who are very privileged, we're one step away from being homeless, if you think about it. Right? As an able-bodied person, if you fall and break a leg or get sick and have to leave work for a sustained amount of time, you could end up losing your role at your job. And so I think we take that for granted many times. And then barriers to education, right? And we all know, because most of you in here are educated, probably educated times 2 or 3 if you have a PhD or doctorate, right? That the folks within this community as well also have barriers that are higher than their hetero counterparts. They don't have to bring multiple people and challenge and check themselves at the door when they come in for an interview. They don't have to say, well, I'm just Joshua the Latino today, right? Many of the folks who identify as queer are having to think, well, can I be out at my school? Can I be out with my family? Can I be out in my community? Can I be out in my religious affiliation, my social group? Can I be out in Bellevue? Can I be out in Kirkland? Can I be out in Seattle? And the truth is, many of the folks, individuals, don't feel like they can, or else they would be already. I mean, numerous of times have people coming into my office talking about, Josh, I've been married for 20 years, I have a family, and I still cannot be out because of what society says. So it is a challenge, and we have to start this change. All right, so who do we know? Who do we know in 2018 who is out and proud? To you. Yes, go ahead.
My son,
Your son. Do you mind saying his name?
Alex.
Alex. Who else do we know? Maybe prominent people, yes. Bella Thorne.
Tim Cook.
Say again?
Tim Cook, CEO of Apple.
Tim Cook. Who else?
Jenny Durkin.
Jenny Durkin. Who else? Who's Jenny Durkin? Who else?
Got one back.
Ah, yes.
A friend in my cohort for my teaching program, Jasper.
Awesome. Friends. Who else? Come on, folks.
Ellen.
Alan. Who else? Come on. Dig deep. Think historically. Whoopi Goldberg. Who else?
Marsha P. Johnson.
Marsha P. Johnson.
Wasn't Henry David Thoreau?
Henry David Thoreau. Who else? Harvey Milk.
Jim Neighbors.
Jim Neighbors. And the list may go on and on. The challenge is not all of you were shouting out names. Bayard Rustin, right? Who was marching with Dr. King in the civil rights. The challenge with Bayard Rustin was he did get his place, right? He also, in terms of race and pigment of his skin, was also able to hide and move, right? In terms of how he could show up in the world. But because of his sexual orientation, he was never able to be on the front and center. Okay. The other challenge with this is most of these prominent people, unless they were out all along, came out because they had stardom. They were out because they were in a place that was already safe for them, and they could. Ellen, she had a show, and when it was going to be canceled, decided to come out with her partner Portia, right? And others, even political figures who have now come out. It's like this movement and trend, and I'm not here to knock it down and say that it's a bad thing, but folks need to start doing it sooner. Folks need to start doing it before they have status, i.e. privilege, right? And then there's struggles of today. What is happening today? What would you say would be a major struggle of the queer community today?
Things are backsliding.
How are things backsliding in your opinion?
Just kind of the way the whole nation's looking at things. It's like they're trying to back off all the rights that were given in the last 8 years.
Right, or even the last 2 years, right? When we think about marriage licenses, especially in Kentucky, people choosing, right, who work for office saying, I'm not going to sign or give this, this marriage document, right? So this backsliding, right, us kind of moving back to where we were in the prehistoric ages, much like the civil rights movement, right? It's like we make all these transitions and movements forward and then we go backwards. And in my opinion, because of fear, right? So same-sex marriage act, and I love this, Barack Obama, please come back. Our journey is not complete until our gay brothers and sisters are treated like everyone else under the law. Wow. Somebody who really stood up and publicly finally said something, right? I remember that day. And I remember sitting and crying because as a gay male, finally being acknowledged publicly. And that guy was out of the womb out. So it was really nice. Bullying still is very much rampant in all of our schools, and not even just in schools, but in colleges and universities still in terms of hazing and how folks show up to their classrooms. And the sad thing about this is bullying, and not even in the physical sense, but the emotional, social sense is much more damaging because I see them in my office some 20, 30 years later still dealing with the trauma. So whatever we can do as a community to help negate that and help individuals, if we can just step in, we'll be doing some justice there. Gender identity and anti-discrimination policies. Do you all know what yours looks like in your school district? That's very important to do some homework around that. And when I think about current issues around the Seattle bathroom and having gender-neutral restrooms be present for everyone, not just because of gender equity, but because of race and religion equity as well. So folks need to look at it a little differently. Non-discrimination laws that are still current. Well, so it's probably hard to see up here, but in purple, statewide employment non-discrimination laws, which means this covers sexual orientation and gender identity. And then statewide employment non-discrimination laws covers only sexual orientation, not gender identity. And then obviously, all of the gray is open for flipping the coin. I'm going to go speak in Michigan in a couple weeks, and we're going to talk about marriage law and how that affects individuals who are trying to adopt. Because in that state of Michigan, currently, if an individual had a same domestic partnership and they adopted children, the other parent actually has to fill out new paperwork asking for permission to be a step parent. So we're still discriminating. And when I think about the tens and thousands of dollars that individuals that are same gender are trying to just adopt, even here in Washington State, it's sickening. Because what we are doing is we are then selling children. All right, so you guys are all at, now we're going to get into the good stuff, right? Not that that was not good. But at your table, what I'd like you to do with folks, and I've got some large paper here, is we're going to see how much you know about some terms that we use on a daily basis. And what's great about this exercise is we tell our students all the time, oh, I'd like you to draw me a picture. And I was looking at the beautiful art that the students here in Bellevue School District get to do. Well, now you all are going to have your opportunity to be the Picasso and Van Gogh. And in a moment here, I'm going to let you know what we're going to do. So, Krishana and Christian are handing out some giant paper for you. Okay. So, what I'd like you to do is in a moment I'm going to pull up the screen and it's going to have some terminology. As a group, what I'd like you to do is to build consensus within your table. Consensus, right? Everybody must agree, somewhat. And I'd like you to draw out what each term means. Okay? No words can be used. It has to be all pictures. And you have to put up Mr. Google or Miss Google. They Google. Because I want to see what you know. Okay? Yeah. No research. No internet research. I see your phone. Right? Okay. So we have biological sex, gender identity, gender expression, sexual orientation, and sexual behavior. So 5 terms. And I'm going to give you all 10 minutes to draw these. Yes, question.
Consensus needs to be what is actually drawn.
Right. Yes. So consensus must be based on what you agree to draw. And your time starts now. And you're going to want to draw them separately. Try not to connect them.
I know. That's what I'm like, this is
A baby? Yeah, let's kind of work our way up to the
And then, you know, can I pause everybody for a moment? Because I can already see it. I'm making it easy on you, really. But I'm going to up the ante a little bit. I know we're a mixed room in here. Here's one of my critique and challenges, I think, of our education system in the United States is we're afraid to talk about sex. And so for this to work, you have to really think outside the box and bring your whole self in and not hold back, okay? So drawing can sometimes, I think, put some fear in people's eyes and say, well, this is what I would like to draw, however, will it offend someone? If we work from that frame of mind in terms of offending people, we won't move. We won't move. So challenge, go.
I guess it's really like only kind of showcase a public drawing. I mean, I don't know.
Okay, so we could
They're expecting you did from the bottom to the top.
let's go ahead and get started. Let's bring it back. So let's see how well you did. And if you didn't get to finish, that's okay. And it's going to be hard to kind of, it'll be hard to report these out. So what you'll do is you'll have one spokesperson from each table just stand where you're at and walk us through. Why don't we start with you all?
Oh, sure. You guys saw me.
Okay.
Don't forget to add our little underdog figures in there at the end.
Okay, for biological sex, we had basically, like we was talking about earlier, identifies through genitalia if you're a boy or a girl. This is a doctor holding up not a seal, but a baby, and saying it's a girl or it's a boy. Gender identity, we have a picture of the brain, persons start to figure out who they are, what they are. Gender expression, this is actually a stick figure of a boy playing with a doll or a girl playing with a macho yellow Tonka truck. And then get into sexual orientation, identity of erotic response was, this is a girl, boy, with then a question mark and a heart. They're probably teenagers, like, okay, do I like boys, do I like girls? And you guys chime in if I'm missing anything.
Nope.
And sexual behavior, we didn't get a drawing, but did we have something we wanted to throw out? Did we win a drawing? No, not really. That's how far we got.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
This is really tough,
Yeah.
right? This is really tough, and this is what we ask our students to figure out daily. And I gave you guys 10 minutes.
For the first one, we do a DNA strand.
Okay.
And it's X, 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 Y, and then X question mark. Because we do know there are other ways it can mix up. I think it was Down syndrome is like X, X, Y or something. There's an extra Y in there. Second one, gender identity, the symbol for male, female, and then we added a question mark into it because there's so much more that can be said with just those two. But that's like, we're just trying to go with symbols that are recognizable. And then here, we were thinking, people use their clothes to express who they are a lot. And so we drew little bathroom signage, and we didn't put hair on them because they aren't necessarily boy-girl, but one of them is wearing a dress and one isn't.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sex we did XX and XY, and then for gender identity we did these three. For gender expression we did like what people wear or like show. For sexual behavior and sexual orientation we did like boys with boys, boy girls with girls, or boys with boys.
biological sex had to do with body parts. So we have somebody with breasts and a vagina, somebody with a penis, and somebody with a penis and breasts. Gender identity, we thought, had a lot to do with what we think of ourselves, how we identify ourselves. So we just have the brain. Gender expression, we too thought that one very common way that we express to one another and that we see gender expressed is through our dress. Sexual orientation, two people like each other. We're drawn to each other. They could be any sex, either one or both. And then sexual behavior, it's behind closed doors.
That's a new one. That's a new one.
Okay, so we put, for biological sex, we talked about, like, DNA, yes? Okay, and then...
Which is right here.
This one right here. And then, gender identity, we put this small picture of, like, someone looking in the mirror, like, how they identify themselves when they see themselves in the mirror. For gender expression, we put all this stuff down here, like, clothes and nail polish and, like, other means, like... Music. Art, that kind of stuff. We didn't get to sexual behavior because we ran out of time. But
Oh, is this upside down?
yeah. And then sexual orientation, we put the signs. Like female, male, male, male.
Thank you.
That's all.
Okay, so for biological sex, we just had the the X, Y, and XX chromosomes and the symbols. For the gender identity, we had somebody questioning, somebody content that, or sure that they were female, sure that they're male, one that's happy that they're both bi, or something different. And then 3, gender expression. What was this one?
You said it was the international symbols.
Oh, right. International symbols for male, female. And then number 4, we went with the different possibilities of orientation, I guess, and how they attract to different people. And then 5 was just, we just put a heart to represent all different kinds of love and attraction and between different people.
Okay, Team Equity.
Alright, so, for biological sex, we drew a penis and a vagina and did the spectrum line in between to indicate that people can be born with anything along that spectrum. For gender identity, we drew a brain with the male and female symbols inside of it to show how somebody self-identifies. For gender expression, we used a mouth talking with preferred pronouns. For sexual behavior, we have a lot of stick figures engaging in different sexual acts to show that a lot of things that are somewhat fetishized are not actually the bad sense. For sexual orientation, we drew somebody staring at a light bulb indicating what turns them on.
Thank you. Well, so smart. All of you. Everybody. Thank you. And, you know, and I appreciate this last group here who showed that we're not built to even live on a binary, right? And that most of it is all fluid. So when we think about biological sex, it is the chromosomes, it is everything, our DNA, right? And it runs everything from male to female and intersexed in the middle. Where gender identity, this idea around masculinity and femininity and how the androgyny world within the middle all fit on this idea about psychological sense of self and how I see myself internally. Many times what I share with folks is it's how you look at yourself in the mirror. And when you see yourself in the mirror, what do you truly see? Because we're the only person that sees that. Okay? The idea around gender expression in terms of communicating out. How do I communicate to the world around me how I want them to see me? Not how I want them to label me or how I want to look to them, but how I want to look to myself. How do I want to express that out? And you'll see designers now who are making clothing that are really gender neutral, right? And so it's going to be harder and harder for us to draw. I'm not going to be able to do this exercise much longer, where folks can draw a dress and we can assume that that would be for a female individual. Okay. This idea around sexual orientation, the identity of erotic response. You all hit it on the nail. It's this idea that when we feel chemically, when we feel physically, what is happening internally? Wow, this woman really turns me on, or this male-identified person turns me on, or this trans individual excites me. Whatever gets us moving internal is that erotic response. What turns you on, folks, is what orientation is about. And then sexual behavior is touch in the simplest form. And I think what happens is when we start to talk about queerness and when we start to talk about individuals who identify as queer, we automatically run to the behavior piece. And I know this because my ex-partner was a principal, and every time he wanted to bring in equity work around sexual orientation and queer identity, he would constantly get pushed down because what his superiors would say is, no, but I can't get out of my mind that it's two men having sex. So we sexualize, and I appreciate you saying that, we sexualize and eroticize this idea around queerty, what it means to be queer, right? When it's all of these things. Like most of us who identify as hetero, we're all of these things, not just a sexual being. However, society wants to say that that's your job, to procreate, make children, etc. But there's so much more. We're so layered. And I love this because this group up here was talking about this idea around this gender unicorn. And the genderbread person used to be used, however, it's not used because it still signifies this idea around gender roles and what that person might look like. So we've moved to this idea of a unicorn, where internally we think in terms of gender identity, right? Male, man, boy, other genders, feminine, woman, girl, etc. This idea around expression of self and feminine and masculine and others. Sex assigned at birth, female, male, other, intersex. Who we're physically attracted to, right? Cisgendered women, cisgendered males, and other genders within the spectrum. And then this idea of emotionally attraction, or erotic, the erotic sense and the attraction to somebody. And I love this. You can find this also. I think it's pronounced Metrosexual is a great website to go to. They've got wonderful curriculum that you can use in your classrooms, K through 12. And so we use this because I think it helps folks think about it differently, rather than just taking this idea around sexual orientation and saying, well, it's all sex. And that's just one small part. The other thing, right, in terms of using language, right, this idea of she, her, hers, how do you use these pronouns? She is an excellent student. Her group project was excellent. Z, zer, zen, zer, zay. Z is a real leader on campus, a leader on campus. I've learned so much from Zir, or Zem. The TA said that Zir, Zez contributions were instrumental to the lab's success. So there are ways that you can use this in language when you're providing a narrative for somebody, or you're giving feedback, especially in their writing. Here's the perfect way to help individuals understand that not only are you acknowledging and making them noticed, but that you have some level of understanding for yourself. So let's get into some meat. It's important that we understand power and privileges, especially when we think about heterosexual and heteronormativity living, and also this idea of cisgender privilege. So just for about 5 minutes at your table, I'd like you to discuss the two areas up here. This idea around heterosexual cisgender privilege. What do you think it means? What do you think, or how do you think it shapes people's beliefs? What's this idea around heterosexual privilege versus heterosexism? And then if we have time within that 5 minutes, go into the idea of homophobia versus transphobia. What's the difference between the two? Why are some people homophobic and transphobic? And what are some of the results of people being homophobic? Okay, so just at your table, 5 minutes.
What? What did you say? Oh!
Together. Some really great conversations happening, and we could probably talk weekends about this information. What came up for you most? What struck a chord in your groups? How many of you understand what the idea of cisgender means? What was wonderful is as I was walking around, some of you were educating each other around that, which is amazing. That's how we do our work, right? This idea of cisgender being that you can basically pass as the gender that you were given at birth, right? So up here today, I'm in what you would call man drag, right? I can project, I can express my maleness, most of my masculinity, right? But most of you would see me as a male. Now, if I had walked in here in high heels and a dress, that would be very interesting because you would be like, what is happening here, right? So this idea that cisgender is this biological sense that you can express out and people don't have to try and guess. And you don't have to ask yourself, who are they? Because trust me, all of us do it, right? So what came up? What came up in your groups? What is heterosexual and cisgender privilege? How does it show up? Yes?
I think there's a default convenience.
Say more about the default convenience.
Well, just the idea that we're substituting recognizing truth and who other people are around us because of convenience and speed.
So we've got these roles, we've got these constructs, and because these constructs are here and available, readily available to us, right, we just start to put people in these boxes and just assume, and it's easy for us to live that way.
And the brain wants to categorize and look for patterns too, but when we try to recognize people in front of us, we have a default setting of just what's quickest and easiest, and what do I recognize, and how do I move on to the next thing. I think a lot of that is subconscious that we do that, but it doesn't help the person who's standing in front.
Right. And what I'm going to call that, right, is this idea of us not wanting to receive, right? In my line of work, I talk about receiving. In order for relationships to work, both individuals have to be open to receiving each other and what they bring, right? And many of us won't look at each other in the eyes and even just say, hi, how are you doing today? My name's Josh from Magallances. Joe, it's good to see you. How was your morning today?
It was good.
It was wonderful.
For a Monday morning, it was good.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And you're going to go home and have a wonderful dinner tonight.
Yeah, we're having tacos tonight.
Tacos.
Yep.
Tacos, not Tuesday. That's
On the table at
tomorrow.
6:30, I heard.
Right?
Yep.
My point is I gave him space. But what we do like to do is this. Hi, I'm Joshua. Here you are? Okay. Right? We don't give each other the space because we feel comfortable doing that opposed to this. And my truth is, my idea is, and it's a small theory, but it's really basic, truly, is if we did a lot more of that, I wouldn't have to be doing this. But I'm going to really promote all of you to spread that so that I have work to do. Okay? But my goal and my dream is that we don't have to do this work. In fact, instead, I can teach the history of. Right? But we've got to have space for that. So this idea of what do you think it means? Awesome. How does it shape us? I think you started us on that. Like, where do we learn this stuff from? Come on, this is where we get real.
Well, I was going to say that heterosexual privilege is that we assume that everybody, that the families are a man and a woman, and we assume that everybody's partner at home is the opposite sex of what they are.
Yeah.
And you assume, I assume that if I do ask you what you're doing for dinner, you're going to tell me what your wife, who's a woman, cooked for you. That's the heterosexual privilege, is that we assume that everyone is hetero.
Right. And then what's challenging for me as a gay man, right, is now I have to file through and filter through. Wait, she just said partner. Shit, what does that mean for me now? Right? Does that mean she might be queer? Or is she talking about her husband? Then I have to ask further questions. It gets sticky, it's challenging, right? And I appreciate you talking about privilege. Many times I get that still. Or, hey Josh, God, you're so handsome. Ah, it's such a shame. Funny, but not so funny. I'm like, not for the man down the street. However, what they assume in that cisgender thinking is, Josh won't get to have any children. And he's wasting himself on some man. Yeah. Right. Interesting. What else? What's this idea? Some of you were not struggling. It was actually a good conversation around this idea of heterosexual privilege versus heterosexism. What do you all think? What is that? What's happening? Christian is like, it was me talking about it.
I'm waiting for the answer. I put that out there.
Yes.
I don't know if I'm correct on this at all, but when I first saw that, what I thought was, well, like when you hear people say like reverse racism, right? And so I don't think there's heterosexism. I think that's something that heterosexuals who feel, for whatever absurd reason, threatened by LGBTQ people, they're making that an issue. Like, well, no one cares about us, and like, we're on the outs now. Like, that's kind of what I thought when I saw that.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
But have you heard of like that thing that went on Twitter, like people want to make the straight people one? You heard that? Yeah, it's exactly like that.
Anytime you say ism, doesn't that mean power? It has to do with the power differential. Isms.
So maybe with a client who identifies as a trans male, and his partner also identifies as a trans male. However, his partner wants my client to do all of the female roles in their relationship. Am I painting a picture now? Are you seeing how this is playing out? So even in an identity that identifies not within the binary, this is how, in my opinion, detrimental and hurtful and harming this is as a society. And you're exactly right. There is power and privilege when we talk about heterosexism. I can't even say it. I'm like so worked out, right? And heterosexual privilege, because my client's partner is bringing in that privilege, right? Well, this is what a male is supposed to do, and you're a little beneath me, so I'd like you to do that. When they've chosen this idea and identify as trans males to get out of the binary, that's how internalized homophobia and internalized transphobia exists. Yes? Sure.
I believe that they exist independently from each other.
Which parts?
Like all the biological gender identity and all the reasons that we have this heterosexual and cisgender privilege. Do you think that might have to do with the fact that like all of these things aren't like so independent, like the fact that you're a male and that you have certain, I guess society gives you certain things that you need to do, and that you identify as a male. Do you think that those are all very separate from each other? Or do you think that they're
Yeah. What you're working on right now is your dissertation for your doctorate. Right? And I say that in truth because what I'm trying to say or illustrate is that social constructs shouldn't be here, right? That's the one end. However, on the other hand, they kind of keep us safe too, right? Because it's community that we can identify with, right? And you can't talk about one without the other. It's like saying I'm just a gay individual, but forget about my race. Can't do that, because it's all intersected. So even though they do land individually, they are still working against and with each other all the time. What's your name? Mahela? I hope in a few years I'm reading your research. Truly. Thank you. So what's this idea around homophobia and transphobia? I'm kind of alluding to it and talking a little bit about it, but what happens? Why are people homophobic and transphobic?
So, I'm not just basically calling out non-believing, but I think Christianity is
And can I challenge and correct and say the United States? Because America is in North, Central, and South.
Yeah, we got identity.
Thank you. Right? Yeah, thank you. Good.
It's not just President Christianity, it's Judaism and Islam as well.
It's multiple. And one of the things we do know is that God, whatever your God is, preaches one thing universally: love. This is where I get into trouble. The Bible has been written so many times. Most books have. And really in structured religion, structured religion, right? This social group that we all choose to be a part of. That's the other big piece. We choose to be a part of these social groups. We either choose or not to buy into and drink the Kool-Aid of that religion. So we can continue to be that because this wonderful book that also says you should kill someone else in my name. You should not do whatever else. If you choose to continue, right, then you would be choosing that doctrine. And what I would say is that when you read those books, like any books we read, and as we know in history books, right, they're not all taught truth. To take what you want from it and draw your own conclusions. And it's tough, because I have clients all the time who come to me and say, Josh, my religion says this, my family says this, and if I come out, I'm going to be out. Right? It's a double bind, and it is challenging, but that you're exactly right. For those of you that spoke up, that's how homophobia and transphobia still exists. We still continue it to stay there. We continue to not let us progress as a society. What do you think some of the results are, without me even just giving the answer? How have you seen some of the results of homophobia and transphobia come up in Valley School District? I'll come back. Maybe somebody who hasn't spoken. Anxiety. How many students do you see their attendance start to fall? I have a friend right now whose daughter will not go to school because of that, right?
Well, I just wanted to go back to the idea of why some people homophobic, because I think there's a lot of fear in there.
How many fear?
I think that people are really, they catch it. That it's something bad and somehow it'll spread if you're exposed to it, or you'll catch it, literally. So like there's a fear, I need to stay away from something that seems other. So you don't understand it, and you don't know these people, and you don't make friends with them, then you won't catch it.
Right. I mean, you know, this idea of catching it, or gay by association, right? So if you hang out with individuals who identify as queer, that you too will be that, right? You know, the movie I just saw as well, I mean, you think about World War II and military individuals who couldn't be with another male because they'd be killed, right? And then they come out into our society and are still ridiculed and have to hide behind closed doors. And for many of you who probably lived through the 80s, this idea around the Black Death and AIDS, and it was just the gay males in our country who were spreading this. Don't talk to them, stay away from them. In fact, you're in a quarantined area in a hospital. You can't catch it like that, right? So this idea of fear and ignorance, right? Last one, then we're going to move.
And also there's really interesting intersectionality between the violence that MTF, transgender, and FTM, transgender folk face. And that kind of like intersects with the homophobia and the transphobia, because most often it's FTM that experience the violence from straight males assuming that, or MTF, straight males assuming that they're
Right, right. You know, and you know, none of us, these are all, I guess, mutually exclusive, because we can all as well be homophobic, right? Even if you're in group, right? And that's when it happens the most. You're not gay enough, you're not straight acting enough. On all gay apps you'll see now, right? Mask for mask, masculine for masculine. What does that mean, right? So now we're starting to mean our people in our community, and especially our trans individuals, right? Who have been, that T has finally been thrown in, and then folks are saying, well, but you're not really a part of us, because you can't figure out who you are, right? I don't see that as being exclusive, or inclusive, excuse me, right? And so we're still doing it within our own. I do want to run through this because our transgender family also is usually the group that is omitted from any presentation. And shame on me, because now that we're coming to the end, I'm doing it an injustice and doing it towards the end. But this idea of, and this is going to start popping up because I'm seeing this in my practice more so, and youthful individuals, 13, 14, 15-year-olds who are coming out, and you're going to start to see them in your school. Usually around the age of 4, they start to see themselves as being different. And this idea of, whoa, wait a minute, my maleness is different than everybody else who I'm in preschool with, perhaps. And my femaleness is different as well. This idea of discomfort with their own sex and not knowing. How many of you guys have seen the book Princess Boy? One person. Y'all, do your homo work. Like, get it. It's a great book. The author graduated from Garfield High School in Seattle, and wonderful book around gender and fluidity. But this idea of feeling discomfort with their own sex. In the book, the Princess Boy decides from a young age, I think 4 or 5, that he wants to start dressing like a princess. And how wonderful for his mother and father to be on board and allow this to happen. African American community, couple, and they're like, let's do this. So when you think about the intersection about culture and acceptance, especially around homophobia, right? They were demystifying this and really doing some good work around that. Yes?
Just a little question about the book. Is it for like adults or kids or?
Well, if you all haven't read it, I would read it first.
Okay.
It's really good. It's a children's book.
Okay.
Yeah, it's awesome. Polka Dot is another one. Strong, persistent cross-gender identification. I just mentioned some of it, right? This is what I want to dress like instead. I'm working with an individual currently, 14 years old, who some days he will dress in female clothing and other days dress as male-perceived clothing. This identification around gender role and other gender. You'll start to hear the terms gender queer, gender fluid, no gender, right? And then some folks wish to have the anatomy of the other gender, whatever that is. This is the more clinical piece, which I only talk about because it's still part of the DSM, unfortunately, but this idea of clinical distress or impairment to social, occupational, or important areas. You probably hear, do you have any counselors in here? One. Cool, awesome, okay, we're family. But this idea of dysphoria, right? And seeing self other than other, right? Other than the identity or the expression that they want to be. And so they go through this. In terms of my work, I diagnose folks only if they need it for hormone therapy or they need to have surgery. Coming out to others. Most like all of us, you all had to come out in some way, shape, or form. Maybe your family didn't like your spouse. That's a form of coming out. So you understand what it's like to tell difficult things to people around you who you love. So you understand that part. What you don't probably, if you identify as a cisgender heterosexual individual, is coming out in terms of your sexual orientation and your gender, right? Some individuals will go through hormone therapy, and this is scary because if folks aren't given the opportunity at home, parents say, no, I don't want it, or doctors won't allow it because they don't have a signed letter from a therapist or psychiatrist, folks can find this stuff easy on the streets. And what what I tell my parents all the time is, wouldn't you much prefer your child have it from a real physician compared to somebody online that they find and don't know what's in it? The cocktail. This idea of dealing with passing, and this is probably the hardest one. You'll probably hear folks talk about, oh, I sound too manly or I sound too female, like in order to change my gender. Starting to cross-dress full time, and then seeking treatment, either myself or a primary care physician. And I guess, I know we're coming close on time. If anything, I think this is really important to look at. This is definitely old school when we think about behavior and how we can modify our behavior. This gentleman talked about earlier, what's comfortable, right? This idea of what makes us feel okay to be in the world. And as we look up here, all of these influencers are working from the outside in, and as well, this also works from the inside out. And so when we start to think about our individuals, our students, the people we love, ourselves, how did we learn the things that we do today? How did our behavior get shaped by individuals around us? How do we ourselves behave in the organization and the communities that we live in? And then lastly, how do we begin to change public policy? And are you doing anything to change public policy? Because I think what happens most times is folks think that they don't have an opportunity to have large impacts on change, and you do. As a therapist, I'm writing letters all the time to Olympia, especially talking about funding for community mental health. I speak publicly about it, whether it's in places like this, on TV, Q13, which happens to be very conservative but awesome, you know, and they're slowly starting to make changes. And it's those types of things and those types of avenues where sometimes you have to step out of your comfort zone and make a leaping jump, not step, but a jump, and speak for things that are important to you. And so the next time you have a student who is saying, I'm afraid to go to school, or I'm afraid to go home because my parents don't get who I am, or I can't go out for a specific sport because it's very homophobic, think about how all of these areas, this ecology that we all live in, is playing on all of our identities and the intersections. And how come some of us don't show up with most of the salient identities, and how come some of us get to show up with those identities? So, I'll go ahead and take questions if you have any questions.
I have lots, but I think I need a coach for that.
You need a coach?
Couch.
Oh, a couch.
Couch.
I'm open. My office is in Seattle. I've got business cards. I do have business cards, and you know, I think I'll just go through. And there we go. So here are some resources. My website and my information. Don't hesitate. But I saw a question also up here. So when we think about accomplice, thank you, I appreciate that. Most of us would probably shake our heads to say that when we think of the word accomplice, it's in a negative way, right? Oh, they were the accomplice to the murder, they were accomplice to the burglary, etc. And what I like to say around being an accomplice is it's an opportunity for somebody to really join in from the beginning, right? Just this past weekend, we had the Women's March, right? One might say, wow, Josh, you do great work in the community. You speak on behalf of individuals who identify as women, but we didn't see you at the march. Not really actively moving in my accomplice role. Because they're correct, I didn't go to the march. Right? In many ways, as activists and equity workers, we also have to make decisions on what's going to keep us sustainable and making choice. Because we can't be everywhere. Right? But I'm the first one to speak and help in meetings. I'm also the first person to acknowledge what space I'm taking in every meeting. In fact, I acknowledge it here. I'm a male with some privilege, speaking to you all, right? And so I have to acknowledge that every single day. But an accomplice, when they truly show up and say, I'm an accomplice for gay rights or queer rights, there's somebody who is not choosing to say, well, you know what, that's too uncomfortable for me. I'm not going to go into that space right now. It's that friend you have that says, I've got gay friends. It's that person who says, oh, you're going to go out to another gay bar? How come you just don't go to a straight bar? It's that person who says, oh, you're trans? Really? An accomplice wouldn't ask that. An accomplice would say, educate me. And you know what? Before you educate me, I'm going to do my own research, and let's have a conversation. An accomplice is going to say, I'm also going to write a letter for queer rights. I'm also going to speak on behalf at the next meeting when you get shut down as a female or an individual who's marginalized, right? To me, an accomplice just has much more ground, much more stake. And an ally truly has that area of privilege where we can decide to show up or not. In terms of things to take away, and I can have this entire slide, PowerPoint, Krishana, if I can send it to you guys and you can email it out. There's some good information in there, especially the resources with action plans and what are you doing at your school. In fact, what I was hoping to do today is to have you all reflect and think about what are we doing in our schools at the institutional level? What are we doing at the department level? And how are we making change at the individual level? So how are you making your classrooms or your office space much more culturally responsive, not competent? Because if we say we're competent, that means we are a scholar and a champion in everything, and we can't be. But we can show up culturally responsive in a way that makes space for growth. And also departmentally, how are we departmentally making change that is responsive? Listening, paying attention to individuals in the classroom, folks who are bringing challenges to the workplace and meetings, and then institutionally, who are the folks making the decisions? And when was the last time they heard from you? All right? And also thinking, okay, this is probably going to come at a cost. You know, am I willing to tell my principal? Am I willing to speak to my superintendent or the board and say, hey, this is not happening in our community, right? And so that would be some of the action-oriented things. And as a therapist, I ask folks all the time these questions, right? I think I might be gay, but I'm not sure. How do I know I'm bisexual, gay, or lesbian? You know, one of the things I share out with students all the time is you don't have to figure that out right now, right? My hetero counterparts, what I ask them all the time is, when did you know you were hetero? When was the last time you were asked that? It's an assumption, it's assumed. And so, but yeah, I can send this. And if you have more questions, please don't hesitate, email me and we can definitely chat.
Do you speak just at school districts?
I speak at school districts all over the place. Yeah, city folks. Thank you all at the city table. So it's talking to your city, right? What's happening, what's not? This is a full day thing, usually.
I guess that would be, yeah.
Any other questions? thank you all for coming, because usually what happens at these events is it's the choir. And it sounds like you all are not just the choir, you guys are new people coming in. Keep doing that. Now send other people the next time. Make them come. Bring 2 people. That's how you create change. Thank you.